Hello again Internet, Astro with Roro here, and this is the iOptron HAE29. I've really put this tiny mount through its paces, testing all kinds of payloads and scene conditions, and let me tell you, I've been very surprised at the performance that it provides, especially given the price. This mount was loaned to me by iOptron for this review, and they were very patient with how long I was able to test it out for. But it will be going back to them soon, and they didn't give me any money or provide any input into this video. A few of my viewers commented on some videos asking me about iOptron harmonic mounts, so I actually reached out to them myself as I was very interested to review it, especially because there are a few features that this has that I'm yet to see on any other harmonic mount. And it turns out I really like them. But before we get into those, let's start with what you get in the box. It comes in this nice little carry case. There's space for the mount, a wall power adapter, the manual, test sheet, and the iPolar. If you plan to do a lot of travel with this mount, the case is very well padded and should protect it nicely. The HAE29 has a minimal design, all black with some silver highlights. It's put together well, feels very sturdy, and gives off a sense of it means business with how solidly everything comes together. Attaching the HAE29 mount to the tripod is quite simple and quick. The mount comes with all the items required to do so, and you can tell iOptron has put thought into this connection process. There is only one tool required to do the whole setup, and it has its own little tool space built into the mount, with a magnet to make sure it stays attached and you don't lose it, which is very nice. Let's do a first time setup here together. Okay, so let's start off with a quick setup of the iOptron HAE29. So first things first, you're going to want to find this in the box, and it comes with three little attachments. I can't remember if they were attached or not, but they all have their own individual sized hole which you can screw them into and out of here. And this is really good. So let me see if I can get it to focus on this here. No, oh, there we go. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to unscrew the shortest of these, and this screws directly into the middle here. So this is what the mount uses to hold on to, and then next up you can take off the short one here, and depending on which side you want the mount to be facing, I put mine towards the two legs rather than the one leg here. So that screws into there. Then the spreader just slides down over the top here, and this screws up into the middle of the tripod here. So that can sit nice and tight there. Then you want to position the legs and tighten that down. And there you go. So that's the tripod locked away now. And then next up, grab the head unit. Now, it still amazes me how light these harmonic mounts are, but it's just so easy to take this. And then you want to make sure that your azimuth screws in the back here. Loosen them off because you'll need that space here to go over this pin here. So over that pin, I can find it. There we go. And then down over the middle, and you can see it moves around here. And so if you didn't put in your clutch locking on the side for the azimuth, you would find that if you now put a tripod or a payload on this and tilt it over to the side, it could move and potentially, depending how heavy it was, work its way and fall. So very important that we do this next step, which is getting these two screws here. Hopefully it can focus in on this. There we go. And these go into the little side bits here. So they screw down into the tripod. There's one there, there's the other there. And you can just leave these finger tight for now. So this other one done. There we go. They're sort of finger tight. Can't really screw them much more. But that will prevent the head from actually coming off the mount here, as you can see. It can still move around quite a bit, but it will actually prevent it coming off. Now, that is all you need to get set up. I want to just tighten the azimuth screws at the back there to sort of keep it a bit more locked down, but that's really all you need. Now, I actually do tighten up these azimuth locks a little bit more. Not super tight, just sort of a little bit extra. Put a little bit of tension on them. And what I find that does is it means even when these back polar alignment screws are completely loosened, it prevents the mount head from moving at all. And that's really good because you can still actually, and you can see if I do it this way, if I lock this in, you can see I am actually still able to make adjustments to my polar alignment here. And that's really important because this way you actually don't need the tool. All you need to do to set up and pack down is loosen off this and you're done. It's that easy. It's one of the things I really love about this mount is how toolless it actually is. I know there's been some comments online about, oh, it has an Allen key and all of this sort of stuff, but really, once you're set at this point, you don't need it. Of course, you can take that key and once you've finished your polar alignment, really lock down these screws here. You know, if you really want to tighten it down and make sure it just never moves again, if you've got like a semi-permanent or something like that, sure, you can do that and then it's absolutely rock solid. But I've never found the need for that. So I just leave them a little bit loosened, just sort of like an 1/8 of a turn off like that. And that still lets me do my polar alignment while keeping it nice and locked down. Then you can pop that Allen key straight back into the magnet there and it holds it really nicely. Of course, if you're going to use the iPolar, then you want to just pop it on the front here and tighten down the 2 screws, and that stays on there. The tripod is quite similar to some other carbon fiber tripods available, but it works very well. The leg locking mechanism adds a lot of rigidity to the setup without adding much weight. It's also very easy to loosen without disassembling the whole setup. This makes the mount and tripod combo extremely portable and quick to set up and pack down. In fact, this is how I travel with it. I keep the head attached and simply unscrew the locking here, put this up, the legs fold in nicely, and there we go. Now it's ready to pick up, sling over your shoulder, and put in the boot of your car, or just move it around. And that's one of the wonderful things about this lightweight setup. It's so quick and easy to set up. From this condition here, you can be ready to attach your payload in less than 10 seconds. There we go. Now the altitude and azimuth adjustments on this are quite good. As you can see, there's no real backlash issues, and I had no issues getting an accurate polar alignment quickly on this mount. iOptron has also included not 1 but 2 bubble levels on this mount, but I do wish they were in different locations. There's one on the front under where the iPolar attachment is, and this makes sense to me because if you're in Alt-Az mode, then this will be facing straight up and you can easily see that bubble. However, the lower one is here, and in EQ mode it's really difficult to see and get a proper reading on. It would have been nice if they'd put it on the side or on the back or somewhere a bit more visible. But still, points for having it there respective because it is better than nothing. Now, at first glance, this mount only looks like it has a single width dovetail holder on the top here, but iOptron has cleverly accommodated for both sizes. So I do have the HAE29 in its widest configuration here, but it's actually really simple to swap between the two. So what you want to do is you want to take the Allen key and unscrew the 2 screws holding this plate here. Then you want to flip it over and just pop those screws back in and line them up with the underneath drill holes. There we go, there's 1. There's 2. Just tighten them down. They don't need to be super tight. So that's all you need the tool there for. And then on this side, just unscrew this And the whole section actually comes out, and it has a short, if I get this focusing here, it has a short side and a long side. And so the short side, so when you're on the wide configuration, we just flip it over and then it slides back in here and then screws back in on that one, and then just the same this one here, flip it over, and there we go. Now that we've gone over the mount in general, let's take it outside and see how the iPolar works and get set up. Alright, well, as you can see, I am not at my balcony, and that is because I don't have a view of the South Celestial Pole from where my balcony is. Unfortunately, there is a building in the way, so I can't use this kind of device. But today I do have a great view of the South Celestial Pole, which is just up over here. So we're going to be using the iPolar to polar align tonight. Isn't that right, Mia? So, as you can see, this mount is super light, and this is exactly how I travel. I just leave everything here combined, and it's really easy to then just pull out the legs, open them up, and then we can just lock the threader back in here. There we go. Decently tight, not too tight, and we can then work on getting her level. So I think the South Celestial Pole's over this way a little bit. I don't usually image from here, so I'm just going to check with my phone here. And a little bit more to this side. And that should be close enough to get started at least. So next up, we want to make sure we are level, and looks like this leg needs to come down a little bit. So I'm just using the bubble level in here, but unfortunately it's a little bit difficult to get an exact reading simply because the mount head is in the way, but that should be good enough just in case we need to move it later. But if you're not really level with your mount, then as you adjust your altitude and azimuth screws, it will impact the other since you're not perfectly flat. So you do want to be as flat as possible so that when you make those individual altitude and azimuth adjustments, you don't impact the other. So that is a good starting point there. Then we just get our laptop and unplug the rest of the mount in while we're here. Got all the cables ready to go. So first up, I'll plug in the hand controller and then get the mount powered up here. And what I like to do is using the hand controller, it's got this little loop on top. I just thread that through my power cable, so then the mount hand controller just sort of sits really nice and easy to grab here. Can turn that on there, and then there is a USB cable plugged into the bottom of the hand controller, which goes going into my laptop here. So with the other USB cable that comes with the mount, you can plug that straight into the bottom of the iPolar there, and well, now we're ready. So we just got to wait for it to get dark enough to do our polar alignment. I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so it is now dark enough for the iPolar to detect some stars, and I'm going to start doing a screen recording on my computer so you can see me as I do this, but let's walk through the iPolar process. So once we've loaded it up, we simply hit connect. It'll then take a minute to find the camera and attach to it. We can then come into settings here and read the lat long from the mount, and this will get your details from the mount that you have set up or from the GPS unit of the mount, which is great. Pulls it straight in here. If you want though, you can click change and manually adjust it there if you don't have that sort of functionality or it's not sort of connected in the same way. You can then take a dark frame here. You'll want to make sure that the lens cap, of course, is on, but if you haven't taken one before or it's been a while, you can take that dark frame, and that just helps to reduce the noise that it's doing. Otherwise, you can just load the last dark frame that you have, and we can get going from there. In the background here, you can see the images that it's currently taking. Yes, there's a bit of cloud about tonight, so it's actually going to be a real test of the iOptron here. So what we want to do, come into settings, load that last dark frame, and then now you can see the stars that it is picking up here. So it will then track all of these stars, and you can change your exposure time on the left here from sort of really quick all the way down to really long. And usually the longer, the more stars you're going to be able to get. So we'll see what happens here. All right, and now we can see it's detecting about, 15 or so stars, and it's pointing me up in the direction on the top left of the screen there. So I'm going to take that and follow those instructions and adjust the mount up. What we can see is the red circle, that is the pole, and the red plus, that is where my mount is pointing. So we've got to go up a little bit. Yeah, a little bit more, and then adjust it over to the right here. Crank it over a bunch. How's that looking? Oh, we're getting very close. A little bit more. Oh, sorry, no, we're too... Oh, okay, I like this. This is the first time I've done the polar alignment here, so I'm learning as we go, and I like how it really zooms in here and gives you that massive view of exactly how close you are once it looks like you're within a certain distance. So, looks to be about our vertical, and a little bit too far on the horizontal there, so we'll go back this way here. And that's pretty damn close. Oh, there we go. Now that we know how to polar align the mount, let's talk about cabling it all up and getting ready to talk about performance. To start with, let's talk about the hand controller. Now this hand controller is fine, the buttons feel nice, and everything seems to work pretty well, and it connects straight under the front. Oh, if I can find it. There we go, and plugs in just there, and I like how it's sort of on the bottom here, nicely hidden. However, there is one problem with it, and that is the mount itself doesn't have a USB port. The USB port actually comes on the bottom of the hand controller, so even if you are doing imaging, you do still need to take the hand controller with you. And this is one of the things I would have loved to see iOptron cater for, is being able to plug your computer directly into the mount itself. Just simplifies the whole process. Of course, functionally, nothing is lost, and you can do everything through the USB here that you would need to plugging it directly in. Next up is the power, and iOptron does give you a power brick with a connector in the box, which is great to see, and this does plug straight into the front. Where is it? Just there. There we go. And there we go, you can hear the mount has now powered up. Now there is one little gimmick with the power as well, and that is that it does use a 2.5mm DC port rather than the standard 2.1mm, which you'd be using if you had an ASI Air or a Pegasus Astro Power Box or something like that. So do be aware that you will need an adapter from a 2.1 to a 2.5mm if you're planning to use one of those devices, so don't get caught out. The final port available is an ST4 port, which is on the front under this side, and that's just for your classic ST4 guiding if you do want to go down that path. Now the HAE29 has a pretty decent slew speed of 6 degrees a second, and it's also reasonably quiet while it does so. Let's have a bit of a listen. So there we go, that's what it sounds like at max slew speed. Now it's rated at having a 3.5 kilo payload without the counterweight, and I have no counterweight bar attached here, but you can go up to 18 kilos if you do want to attach that counterweight bar. And that's certainly very impressive for such a small and light little mount, and it definitely covers most of the setups you would want to use on a portable rig like this one. The HAE29 has two great features I'm yet to see on any other harmonic mounts. Many competing mounts these days have a brake on them to stop backdriving occurring on the RA axis, but the HAE29 takes this a step further with a brake on both of its axes. This means that if you run out of juice in your battery, or you have a power outage, you won't get any backdriving in either axis, no matter how unbalanced your payload is. Wow. Well, as you can see, we just completely lost power, but the mount has stayed exactly where it is. In fact, it's still turned off right now. And yep, it's stuck exactly where it is, so those brakes did a great job. The second feature I love is that the HAE29 keeps a memory of where it was even after power down. This means you don't need to home the mount every time you turn the power on, which makes setup even more simple than other harmonic mounts. In fact, I've only had to home this mount twice in all the nights I've used it, which is awesome. The software for the mount is the iOptron Commander, and while it took me an hour or so to get used to it, now that I am, it's easy for me to use and I feel quite comfortable with it. I also have not had any issues with it, no bugs or unexpected behavior from the mount or software, which is great to see. I have been fortunate enough to test this mount under good sky conditions quite a few times now, and I've been really impressed with how it has performed. I've tested it with both Nina from my PC and also the ASI Air, and it hasn't had any major issues with either setup. With both setups, I had it take 2 guide images every second, or a 0.5 second guide exposure. As this mount doesn't have an encoder, and so it needs constant guide corrections to stay accurate. But the good news is that it responds extremely well to those corrections when they are given. The HAE29 comes with a spec sheet that tells you how the mount performed in the factory tests. My sheet says the mount has about 21 arc seconds of error, and in my own testing, I got a very similar result of 19.59 peak to peak on the RA axis. In fact, here's what the periodic error of the mount looks like over its entire cycle. PhD2 did measure a small amount of backlash in DEC, but I didn't actually see any evidence of this in reality, and I didn't end up enabling backlash compensation to get my guide test results, which we'll talk about next. So here you'll be able to see the PhD2 settings that I used to get the guide results that I talked about. I used a 0.5x guide rate. For the RA, I used hysteresis with a level of 10, aggression of 70, and a minimum move of 0.98. And for DEC, I used the resist switch with a minimum move of 0.15, aggression of 100%, and fast switch was enabled. As I mentioned earlier, backlash compensation was disabled. Now, using my standard test setup, this mount got some very impressive guide results. When I tally up all of my testing nights, total RMS was around 0.68 on an average night. And this is not what I expected, and in fact, there were a few nights where I even saw this mount guide as low as 0.46 total RMS, which is super impressive. If we have a look at the guide logs, we can see that the red DEC line is actually quite stable with not many corrections provided by PhD2. The RA does see quite a few corrections, and this is as we would expect from a harmonic mount like this without an encoder. What's great to see though is that the mount responds quickly to each correction and never strays too far from the center once PhD2 does send those commands. This has meant that stars are kept nice and round, with all setups that I have tested on the mount, so long as you can guide at that 0.5 second interval. If you're imaging with a fast guide scope, then something like the ZWO ASI290mm Mini should do just fine. But if you have a slower guide scope, or maybe you're using an off-axis guide or on a slower main scope, then you will need a guide cam that is much more sensitive to get the guide image speeds that you require to keep this mount under control. I personally have been using the ASI 174mm Mini for that, and it's worked quite well. Now, I really wanted to have a section where I could be critical of this mount, but unfortunately, I've actually been quite impressed by it, and I found myself wanting to use it much more than I originally anticipated I would. To me, the only real thing missing is that USB port, which would mean I didn't have to bring the hand controller with me. The pointing memory and the dual brakes really do make the mount quite a bit simpler and less stressful to use. And I can see the thought that iOptron has put behind many of the HAE29's design features, especially like that little magnet. It's just a lovely touch. Before I leave you with some of the pictures I managed to capture with this mount, I want to say a thank you to Bintel and for the support staff at iOptron who have been very helpful in both loaning me this mount and answering my questions to get set up. This is the first iOptron mount that I have used, and they were all very patient with my noob questions about how to get the most out of this product. I hope you enjoyed this video or found it useful, and now it's time to see what images I captured with this great little mount. My name is Rowan, this is Astro with Roro, and clear skies.